Right. So let's see. Yeah. So in terms of morals and beliefs, again, I think that societies are capable of coming up with those on their own. To be honest, we see this a lot in early ethnographies around Native Americans who were nonviolent, and they actually had very similar codes that we did, coming out of kind of a Judeo-Christian idea. Like adultery was prohibited. Um, However, divorce was much easier if one or the other of the spouse moved out of the house or the hut or the whatever it was. Um, then it was basically considered a divorce. But adultery was definitely looked down on, and there was harsh punishments for it. Um, Murder, a lot of those things, all of the basic tenets of what we see in kind of the Judeo-Christian um, uh, Ten Commandments kind of stuff is covered under a lot of different groups' moral codes, and because a lot of those are required in order to operate a successful culture group or society. And we'll talk about where that's coming from in terms of like humanness a bit down the road in this week's lecture. Claude Lvi-Strauss, remember, our binary structuralist, is an anthropologist focused on myth, believed that myths were a way for humans to deal with binaries like life and death or good and evil. So this is where Strauss is coming back. I've mentioned binaries before. Um, he comes about, again, some fascinating stuff, right? That we create these things because we can't wrap our head around um, the difference between life and death and that binary structure. So then we end up creating things like good and evil. We see life as good, death is evil. So much so that, and on Halloween we kind of play with that in terms of like the dark magic witchcraft stuff, and it's okay that one day out of the year. It's kind of fascinating. Again, but the good evil component and life and death are definitely these binaries that Strauss, that Levi Strauss was definitely focused on in terms of why myth and religion even come about, right, in societies. Supernatural forces and beings. Animatism is the belief system in which the supernatural is conceived of as an impersonal power. Mana is a concept in the South Pacific, which purported that there was a force outside of nature that works automatically and is not a spirit or deity, and manifests itself in objects and people. Some people have more of it, which relates to status. I like to talk about mana because it is really, and even anthropologists have used this analogy, is that it's very similar to the Star Wars Force. Basically, that it's this power, it's the force outside of nature, it works automatically, but it definitely is stronger in some people and in some things more than others. So even when we talk about the force is strong with you, it'd be like the mana is strong with you. So it also had a lot to do with prestige. Some people had more of it, which would relate to status, social status, right? Some of us might even call some of this luck, right? Like lucky. So certain individuals, let's say that we're in a hunter-gatherer group and we're part of a tribe, and fishing is going on, and one person just seems to be super lucky with the fishing. They might get more status out of this kind of mana, this power that's outside of them. Another thing to be really aware of is sacred places, space, rock formations, hills, rivers, temples, churches, but also trees. All of those things can be sacred places. The Ohlone up kind of near my hometown in San Juan Bautista had what was called Sacred Hill. They worshiped that hill. It's where they did festivals and ceremonies. When the Catholic Church was putting in a mission in the area, they basically put a cross on top of their sacred hill. This is also part of religious fervor as it relates to civilization. We tend to replace other people's symbols and sacred places with our symbols, so that, again, let's look at the power of the function of that. If we're part of the Catholic Church and we put a cross on the sacred hill, and the natives keep going up to Sacred Hill because it's sacred to them, Now it almost looks to us that like they're worshiping the cross. This is like a kind of a two-part syncretistic mentality around sacred places and or symbolism. Um, Ritual practices and specialists. This is where we're going to start to get into some like the priests and the shamans, some interesting kind of concepts. Ritual, by definition, is pattern, repetitive behavior focused on the supernatural life. Communion, sacrament, rites of passage, these would all be part of rituals. And again, these would be in the category of sacred rituals. The other side would be, brushing your teeth, feeding your animals. This is all more profane ritual. Life cycle rituals usually are when we discuss them, we're talking about rites of passage. They mark a change in status from one life stage to the other. I think currently in American culture, when you age and you retire, that's another rite of passage, and it would fit into this life cycle ritual as well. People who retire tend to break a lot of their rituals and have to form new ones, whether that's playing golf every day or playing bunco or gaining a hobby, traveling. Basically, replacement of ritual is important during some of these rites of passage. Pilgrimage, round trip travel to sacred places for purposes of religious devotion or ritual. Mecca, the Hajj, right? Traveling to Mecca is one of the five pillars of Islam. And there are millions of people that do that pilgrimage every year, but there's a lot of other pilgrimages. My pilgrimage tends to be to Machu Picchu and Chichen Itza. Those are the two places that I focus on in my thesis, my master's degree kind of period of life. And I tend to go back to those places every year or every few years. Ritual of inversion. Normal social rules and relations are temporarily inversed, like Lent and Carnival. So the idea here is that maybe your normal rituals in daily life, the way that you behave, you cut those out for Lent. And then the opposite is maybe your daily behavior doesn't lend itself to as crazy as you're going to be in Carnival. So ritual of inversion is kind of a fascinating idea as well. We tend to do this, and I would say that Halloween might even be one of those rituals of inversion. We don't typically dress up this way or eat candy the way that we do in Halloween. There's some inversion ritual going on there for sure. Sacrifice, offering of something for transfer to the supernatural. So this is could be kind of almost a looser form of contagious magic. And again, I would say that in civilization, we tend to we move more towards into animal sacrifice and even human sacrifice. And again, this is because we are in desperate need to control the environment, the weather, the food sources, agriculture, all of those things. Prior to that, hunter-gatherer groups didn't sacrifice anything. They were very kind of materialistic in terms of and utilitarian, where everything was in use. They would thank the animal when they killed it, but again, it was not sacrificed. The idea of sacrifice is like I said, like almost a version of contagious magic, where if I sacrifice this goat, God will see that I've given up something and then will reward me, right? It's a way of kind of controlling those supernatural forces. Shaman or shamanka. A shamanka is, sorry about that. A shamanka is a female shaman. So yeah, shamanka is the female version of a shaman. Many times there might have been more than one of these, like different tribes had shamankas for maybe certain seasons and or hunts or gathering or festivals or ceremonies, and they had other shamans for other things. Sometimes healing. A lot of times it was healing with a touch of the supernatural, right? So the way that a shamanka or a shaman would heal would be, and I may have discussed this already, is the kind of have like charcoal water in their mouth when they show up or have it available. And then they like do this sucking thing where they like try to suck the pain wherever the pain is located, try to suck that out. And it's viewed as kind of this black magic piece or this dyeing. Black has this symbolic kind of color to that, and they would do this sucking ceremony thing, and then when they thought that they like had done it enough, they would like shoot it out so that the person saw that or thought that the shaman basically was sucking out the bad stuff and getting rid of it. Priests and priestesses are full-time religious specialists whose position is based on abilities gained through formal training. So this is really about formal training and full-time religious work, basically. World religion is a religion based on written sources, has many followers, is regionally widespread, and is concerned with salvation of souls, and we will discuss those for sure. Religious pluralism. One or more religions coexist at competing or as competing or complementing. Religious pluralism. America has this, right? More than one religion. We have separation of church and state, so there's no state religion. So this is what we're supposed to be practicing in terms of American culture. Religious syncretism. Syncretism, again, is blending of two or more religions or religious ideas. This is what I focused on in my thesis, which was the Maya and the Catholicism, where the Maya would, they had their Mayan gods that they believed in and also their Christian saints, and they would overlap them. So June 22nd might be St. John Day, but really also Mayan-wise, it's Chalk. It's the ceremony or festival of Chalk, which is the rain god. So some interesting overlays where people don't have to pick one or the other. Humans don't tend to be binary unless we're really forced into it, and society kind of teaches us in that way. Really, so what I kind of want you guys to continue to ask is what is religion, but then followed up from that is what is its function? What does it do for us in our daily lives? How long has it existed, right? And really, when we talk about religion, we don't tend to start talking about religion necessarily until we get into civilization. So usually it's more state-run religion. Prior to civilization, we have much more kind of animatism or animism, belief in spirits, powers. Maybe the Great Spirit is something, but there's no like figure. There's also maybe other spirits as well, like Mother Earth, Earth Mother, Gaia. Those kinds of things could also be included. Why do we practice it? How many religions exist? Humanism versus religion, and sometimes they're not versus, right? Sometimes humanism is very much part of the religious kind of thinking and ideas on things, and some religions are very human-centric, some are more God-centric. And again, syncretism is combining cross-cultural elements mainly through religious beliefs. All right, so in terms of religious function, here's kind of a list of what religion does, and you're going to want to know these. These are kind of hints that are going to show up at least on the next quiz or the midterm. One is cultural identity. A lot of times people tie their identity to religion. Another is rituals, practice of symbolic connections to religious beliefs. Another is confirmation of right and correct way of living. Another is therapy for living in today's world, right? Some people go on Sunday to go to church so that they can kind of cope with their everyday life. Another is social cohesion. So when you go to church, you may have a whole subculture or a microculture that you relate to in this religious way. And this is kind of a social cohesion moment, right? Where you're building society based on your religious ideology. And then lastly on here is the use of spiritual magic like prayer to influence or impact the world, people around us, kind of the power of prayer. Also, there's certain churches that do speaking in tongues, laying on of hands, where a group will lay on a hand or lay hands on a sick or ill person, trying to kind of conjure up supernatural power in order to heal that individual. So again, these are really, really important moving forward in terms of what is the function of religion. Remember, a lot of times anthropologists look at things at a functional level. It's not necessarily to focus on maybe like, yeah, but what happens when we die? And religion could also offer that. It could also offer us a creation story. But this is the list of kind of more of a functional, almost to a materialistic kind of perspective of what religion does for us.